Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and we got a super special video today. As you know, Amonkhet is about to release. We had pre-release this past weekend, the official release is this coming weekend, and that means it's time to go over some of the best cards from Magic's newest set, and today we are talking top 10 Commander cards from Amonkhet, and like always, we have a special guest, and today it's Tomer. How's it going today, Tomer?
I'm doing awesome, Seth. This is my favorite time.
Oh, yeah, these are always some of my favorite videos, getting to talk about all the sweet new Commander cards. So, before we get to the 10 cards themselves, what's your overall impression of Amonkhet for Commander?
There's a lot of really cool things. A lot of staples that are coming for multiple decks. There's a new archetype coming out, and just in general, the mechanics of the set really work very well for Commander, as opposed to perhaps Kaladesh's energy mechanic, which is very parasitic and works only with other energy and very limited other mechanics and synergies there. Amonkhet, all their abilities work with a lot of different types of archetypes, and there's a lot of different synergies, and there's a lot of cards that fit into many generic decks. They're just good mechanics. So overall, I'd say Amonkhet is a really good set for Commander, and there's a lot of cards here that we're going to be using.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited for it too. It looks like a above average, I think, Commander set, and it just has a lot of mechanics that are really fun to play with. The returning mechanics are sweet. It has a lot of graveyard value mechanics, and graveyards are kind of the place to be in Commander. So many decks either are built around the graveyard, or at least have some sort of graveyard synergy, or using it in some ways. So for that reason, it just seems like a lot of the mechanics of Amonkhet just happen to line up with what Commander is about. So that makes the whole set exciting.
I totally agree. Also, not even the graveyard mechanics, it's just the card advantage of embalming and aftermath cards. These are the things that a slow multiplayer format really, really needs, because you're not going to be racing people where the amount of cards in your hand is just like as many cards as you need to kill your opponent. These are long, grindy games where you need as much card advantage as you can to keep up with your 3 or more opponents. So stuff like Aftermath and Embalm, where they give you basically an extra card for extra mana, are fantastic for this format.
We have a ton of cards to talk about, so let's jump right into our top 10 list. And coming in at number 10, we actually don't have one card, but a cycle of 5 cards, a bicycle of 5 cards. We have the cycling lands, so Tomer, cycling duels are finally here. What do these do for Commander?
I think they fit in a lot of different decks, just because in Commander, there's a lot of powerful cards in the format that are staples in the format that care about the basic land type. In Black, for instance, you have cards like Cryptghast, Nurkana Revenant, Cabal Coffers. These cards all care about the amount of swamps you have in play. So if you are running a multicolored deck that has Black in it, you're going to be wanting cards like Fetid Pools, Canyon Slow, and the previous dual lands as well that have the basic land types, because they count as swaps and they work well with these cards. Basically all the colors have some sort of basic land matter cards that are really powerful and you want to be running. In white, you have Emeria the Sky Ruin that cares about plains. In green, you have cards like Farseek, Nature's Lore, and Skyshroud's Claim that all care about forests. So these cards are really, really powerful in a multitude of multicolor decks. And anytime you're going to be running cards that care about basic land types, you're going to have to seriously consider these new bicycle lands.
Well, let's move on to number 9 on our list, and that is a new commander, potentially, for everyone's favorite tribe, Minotaurs, NEHEB the Worthy. So, Tomer, what does this do in Commander?
Well, NEHEB the Worthy, first and foremost, is a Minotaur Lord. It is the first time we have a legendary Minotaur creature that actually cares about Minotaurs. So that's exciting for everybody who likes Minotaurs. We don't have too much support for the tribe in general. We did get a couple lords in Theros block, I believe, and obviously we've had the long staple of the Minotaur tribe, the didgeridoo. So NEHEB the Worthy comes along and makes all those cards, all those tribal cards, fit together in one home, red-black, where all the support really is. And it's interesting because NEHEB the Worthy is very aggressive and does a lot of really good buffs for the Minotaur deck, but it comes at the cost, and the cost is you have to have one or fewer cards in hand, which is generally a bad thing to do in Commander, like I said, because in a multiplayer format, you can't just waste all your cards and kill off your opponent. You have multiple opponents, they start at higher life totals, and you really need to grind them out in terms of card advantage or combo them off, both of which are not what NEHEB really does. However, if you are interested in that style of play, there are ways of making sure that at least if you have no cards in hand, at least nobody has cards in hand. You have cards like Sire of Insanity and Mind Slicer, which removes everybody's hands and puts you on top because NEHEB gives you a huge buff. So if everybody has no cards in hand and you have all these super buffed out Minotaurs, suddenly you are actually ahead. So it opens up a weird hellbent tribal deck that we've never seen before and might actually be pretty viable.
That sounds pretty sweet. The other thing I'm excited about is kind of discounting the tribal synergies, and obviously that's a big thing. Legendary Minotaur, that's the calling card of NEHEB, but I'm also kind of excited for the possibility of NEHEB in some sort of discard-based deck if you're playing Waste Knots and Megrims and cards like that, because it does make the entire table discard when you attack and hit one person. So you can attack whoever doesn't have a blocker and make everyone discard, which generates a ton of triggers for your Waste Knot or whatever if you're playing that style of deck. So I think it could maybe have a home there as well, either as like the commander of some sort of discard matters decks, or at least in the 99 of those decks.
Yeah, absolutely. Wheel decks always used cards like Waste Knot, Megrim, Liliana's Caress, Guess Grimoire, and other discard cards. But it was always to discard and then refill everybody's hands with the wheel effects. NEHEB, however, is going to make everybody discard and keep them at low hand sizes. But you still get to run all those great discard tribal-ish cards in a different sort of way. Instead of wheeling them, you are kind of like staxing them, and you're going to be on top, I think, because NEHEB is very aggressively costed. The other Minotaurs are very aggressively costed. So when everybody's low on resources, NEHEB comes up on top, and it's going to be interesting to see how it pans out. I think there's a lot of potential here.
Moving on to number 8 on our list, we have probably my least favorite mechanic from Amonkhet, as highlighted by Dusk to Dawn. So the new split card, fuse back, flashback, whatever you want to call these cards. What excites you about Dusk to Dawn in Commander, Tomer?
Okay, well, say what you will about the templating of it. I think it looks cool because whenever you put it in your graveyard, you can tilt it sideways, and then bam, you see exactly what you can play from your graveyard. It's Dawn. So I like that, the design of it, at least from a practical sense. Aesthetically, okay, not so much. But I liked where they were going with it. As for the card itself, one of my favorite board wipes in Commander is a card called Retribution of the Meek. It's a 3-mana white card, sorcery, and it says destroy all creatures with power 4 or greater, and they can't be regenerated. So in a deck that has a lot of low power creatures, for example, Doran the Siege Tower, where you're playing basically very low power creatures and high toughness, Retribution of the Meek is essentially a one-sided board wipe. It kills your opponent's bigger creatures and leaves all your creatures alone. Same thing with Zedru of the Great-Hearted, or just like white weenie decks that have low power and want to go wide, for example. These board wipes leave alone your stuff and will start killing your opponent's Balefire dragons and other scary things. Dusk to Dawn is essentially Retribution of the Meek. It kills power 3 or greater instead of 4 or greater, so it's a little bit lower cutoff, and it costs 1 more mana, and it doesn't kill regenerators, which isn't really a big deal in Commander. But you also get the upside of the Aftermath effect, which gets all your creatures a power 2 or less from your graveyard to your hand, which is an enormous card advantage swing, and it's great in the same deck that likes Dusk. So in Doran the Siege Tower, if you have a bunch of Tree Folk or whatever with power 2 or less, and you wipe all your opponent's creatures, later on you get board wiped yourself, you play Dawn, and you get all of them back. And for the cost of each side of the card, it's actually really, really aggressively cost, really fairly cost, as if it was its own card. And then together, it's so much value. It's an incredible amount of card advantage and an asymmetrical board wipe. So in the decks that really want those type of effects that are low power creatures, and a lot of them, Dusk to Dawn is an auto-occlude.
So, staple in Kithkin?
I guess so, unless you pump the Kithkin really high up. I think Richard would be happy with this.
I like the aspect of Dawn giving you this weird card advantage in white, like the ability to in the late game get back 3, 4, 5 creatures from your graveyard. And if you're playing Dusk to Dawn, you, like you said, you've likely built around it. You're playing a deck that can support it, and being able to just refill your hand with cards from your graveyard seems really powerful, even if they're all creatures with power 2 or less. And the Wrath part of it is probably better than it looks when it comes to Commander. If I think of the cards that I'm typically playing and typically seeing played in Commander, hitting everything with power 3 or greater is a lot of the most powerful creatures in Commander. I think in constructed formats like Standard, it's a little more hit or miss, but in Commander, almost all of the best stuff, you don't really have people, for the most part, playing, I don't know, Dark Confidants and creatures like that, Grim Lavamancers, that are going to miss this and just sit out there and really annoy you. So it does seem to work really well with the Commander format. So I think you're right. I think it'll see a lot of play, but it needs to be in the right archetype. I don't think you just slot this in over your Wrath of God in your blue-white counter spell, whatever, Sphinx deck or something.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the deck can't be just slotted in as if it were a Wrath of God, because it's not. It's going to leave the utility creatures alone. It's going to leave some of the more pesky creatures alone. But if you are a deck that is all about creatures that are low power, this is going to be a really, really powerful playmaker, and it's going to just wipe the board into your favor.
All right, moving on to number 7 on our list, we have some really interesting new ramp in Harvest Season. So my first question when I saw this is this card better than Cultivate or Kadama's Reach in a typical Commander deck, Tomer?
In a typical Commander deck, I would say probably not. I'd say probably you're better off just, if you're going blind into a deck and you have a green deck and you have to put in a ramp card, you're probably better off just going with Cultivate or Kodama's Reach, because thinking about when you actually want to play a ramp card, it's usually early on in the game, and Kodama's Reach, Cultivate, always works exactly the same way every single time whenever you have 3 mana to cast it, which is great. Harvest Season, however, is very much more restricted on how it gets played. It requires you to have creatures tapped when you cast it, or else it does nothing. And very specific types of decks are going to take advantage of it. There are 2 in mind that I think are going to love this card, and when you do put it in those type of decks, they're going to be far superior to Cultivate or Kodama's Reach for them. The 2 are, first of all, white, weenie smash decks, like Edric Spymaster Tress, which just fills up with 1 or 2 drops that are evasive beaters, and then tries to make up for the lost card advantage somehow in a different way, like with a Coastal Piracy effect, or in Edric Spymaster of Tress way, is you just play Edric and you draw a whole bunch of cards. If you play something like that, you just drop a bunch of creatures. You'll consistently have a 1-drop, consistently have a 2-drop. Harvest Season is now at least going to draw you ramp you 2 cards, which is the equivalent of an Explosive Vegetation, usually a 4-mana sorcery spell. And then the other one that also does very well, again very creature heavy, are decks that run lots of mana dorks. So Derevia Imperial Tactician, if you're going Druid Tribal with Seton, you have a bunch of mana dorks, Llanowar Elves, and its friends that tap for mana and come out turn 1, turn 2, probably flood the board and give you a lot of ramp. They don't need to attack. They just need to tap for mana. And then suddenly your Harvest Season is bringing out 3 or 4 lands just off them. So Harvest Season is very explosive, very high variance, but in the right deck, a creature-heavy deck with lots of low drops, it's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, and that's not even really considering the, I guess, combo potential of cards like Cryptolith Rites or Heritage Druid, stuff that actively lets you kind of flood the board with stuff by producing a ton of mana, but also allows you to tap all of your creatures. So this gives you the potential to, pretty early in the game, not only get a bunch of lands on the battlefield, which is great, but it also gets a bunch of lands out of your deck. So if you're trying to kind of combo off with your elf deck or something, you're not going to be fizzling as you're trying to draw through your deck with your various combo cards or in your Cryptolith Rites deck. So I like that aspect of it as well. If you can cast this in a large enough number, you're actually going to improve your odds of not fizzling while you combo off.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, because you are ramping lands matter themes are going to be really powerful.
Moving on to number 6 on our list, we have HAPATRA, Vizier of Poisons, our second possible commander that we've had on the list. So what do you think of the new Human Cleric? Is this something you're playing as a commander or just in the 99?
I would say of the new legendary creatures that are available to us in Amonkhet, I think HAPATRA is probably the most exciting one for me personally. She's 2 mana, so that means she comes onto the battlefield very consistently, very early on, and you get to play her multiple times in a game if she gets killed, because the mana tax will not go too high. Like if you cast her 3 times, you're only paying 6 extra mana on top of her, which is still reasonable if you go later on in the game. And what she does a lot of stuff, good things, for that very low mana cost. Whenever she deals damage to a player, you get to put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. It doesn't have to be target creature that opponent controls. So if somebody is open, but you want to pick off a Llanowar Elf or an Oracle of Moldiah or something like that, you can just hit whoever's open. It gets even better if you put evasion on her, but I like the flexibility there. And then the most interesting thing for me is, if you put 1 or more -1/-1 counters on a creature, you create a 1/1 green snake creature with Death Touch. So it's a token. It has Death Touch, so it's a great blocker. And it works well with token strategies. So if you have Parallel Lives, if you have Doubling Season, you can make more of them. They're snakes, so maybe we can have a green black snake tribal under her. And also there's a lot of really cool cards that came in Amonkhet and Lorwyn block and similar things that put -1/-1 counters on it. So it works very well with Persist. It works well with all these new -1/-1 counter thingies going on in Amonkhet. And I think there's a lot of cards that never found a home in previous Magic sets. They will start to find a home in HAPATRA. So I think what she does is really cool. And she's probably going to have a lot of leeway on how you build her, too.
So let me ask you, Tomer. I know that +1/+1 counter decks are one of the most popular archetypes in all of Commander. Is -1/-1 counters a thing? Like, is that a deck that people play? Or will this be a relatively new thing thanks to HAPATRA?
I don't know of any deck that actually does -1/-1 counters up until now. And I think there's also, it's more situational in terms of payoff, because whenever you want to put a +1/+1 counter, you just have to have a creature yourself. If you want to put a -1/-1 counter on something, it's generally better that you put it on an opponent's creature to pick them off. However, Lorwyn block, for example, or the Undying mechanic, for example, if you want to reset those, they will actually benefit from you putting -1/-1 counters on your own creatures. So there's going to be some really cool variations here that we haven't seen before. And I don't think -1/-1 counters actually had too much support to actually build a deck around before, like +1/+1 does. And I don't think it's ever going to be as popular as +1/+1 counters, but for people who are interested in this, I think it's going to be very viable and really cool.
Well, moving on to number 5 on our list, this is one of my favorite cards in the set, ASFORETOLD. So, the world's slowest omniscience, essentially, but with some really sweet commander value, because it triggers each turn, which means multiple times each turn cycle in commander. So, what do you think about this one, Tomer? Is this a build-around, or can you just play this in a deck for value, any deck that has blue mana?
I think it is build around. I've seen a lot of people talking about this card excitedly, and for good reason. This card is really, really sweet. But I don't think you can just jam it into any deck and expect it to be an omniscience for you. It does work out pretty slow. So the first turn you play it, it's not going to really do anything. It's going to play cards that officially don't have a converted mana cost, like Ancestral Vision and Living End. However, most decks don't actually want to run these cards. I don't know many cards that actually run it outside of like Yidris Maelstrom Wanderer. So I don't think you're going to start jamming in Ancestral Vision just because you have ASFORETOLD somewhere in your deck. However, if you have ways of adding more counters than ASFORETOLD generally does add to it normally, then it gets really, really interesting. So, for example, if you have a deck that has a lot of proliferate themes that can double or add extra counters to it that way, like Atraxa Praetor's Voice, which is one of the most popular commanders of all time now, I would say, ASFORETOLD is going to be really, really fun in that. Also, Joyra of the Gitu is running a bunch of cards with Suspend. She suspends all your cards, and they have time counters on them that you remove. So cards like Joyra's Time Bug, which is supposed to work with the Suspend mechanic, also happens to work with the ASFORETOLD mechanic as a really cheap, efficient way of adding more counters to it. And also, if you take extra upkeep steps, for example, Paradox Haze is really popular with cards or have really powerful upkeep steps like ASFORETOLD does. If you run those, then ASFORETOLD gets a lot better. So there's a lot of neat little tricks you can do to add more counters to make it an actually worthwhile mana rock to run. But I wouldn't just run it in a generic deck and hope for the best.
Yeah, it just seems so powerful once you get it going. My main concern with this card is with how hyped it has been and how much people have been talking about it. Do you feel like this is already in the territory of one of those cards that you play it and your opponents are going to try to kill you because they don't want you getting counters on this?
I think so. I think it's going to draw more hate than it really deserves. Like, if you're just playing it normally, the turn you play it, it doesn't do anything. It does absolutely nothing. The next turn, if you don't add any extra counters to it, you get to play one drops for free, and they better be instants or else you're only going to get one trigger of it. And then the turn after that, turn 3 that you've played ASFORETOLD, you're going to start casting 2 drops for free. And then turn 4, you get to cast 3 drops for free. It's really, really slow, and it's not worth the hate that you're going to be getting. But again, if you have Proliferate, if you have extra upkeep steps, if you have Strionic Resonator, Joyra's Time Bug, it can actually become an omniscience in time. But you do have to work for it. It's not just a freebie that people should be afraid of.
Well, let's move on to number 4 on our list. And we talked about the cycling lands to kick off our top 10 list. And we're heading back to Tomer's favorite mechanic from Amonkhet with Archfiend of IFNIR. And what do you got to say about this one, Tomer?
I think this is going to be the primary source of removal for the cycling archetype, and it's going to be a powerhouse in other archetypes as well. For the cycling archetype, it's pretty straightforward. If you can cycle a whole bunch of cards in a turn, you can kill arbitrary large amounts of creatures for no mana investment. That's the key thing here. Most of the new cards that care about cycling, they say pay 1 to make a Drake, pay 1 to put a -1 counter on something. This one is it just happens. You don't pay extra mana. You just spend all your mana cycling stuff, and it will do its thing. 5 mana for a 5/4 flyer is already really solid, even in Commander. And then when you have that repeatable removal aspect of it, which can be done at instant speed because cycling can be done at instant speed, it makes it really powerful and something that your opponents have to deal with, or else goodbye all their creatures until the Archfiend actually gets removed. And the other interesting thing is, because it says cycle or discard another card, there's another archetype that I think is going to really enjoy that, and it's going to be the wheel decks, like Nikosaur, the Mind Razor. If you, for example, do Wheel of Fortune and you had a full grip of cards, because the wheel decks often just wheel and wheel and wheel and wheel, if you wheel like 7 cards with the Archfiend out, you're discarding 7 cards, and all creatures' power or toughness 7 or less are now instantly dead on your opponent's ends. And it leaves all your creatures alone. So I think that's bonkers. And it's gonna, whenever it lands on the battlefield, it has to be removed, or else nobody else is playing creatures except for that player.
Oh man, that makes Leovold even more miserable. Not only do you lose all your hand, you lose all your creatures as well when your opponent wheels. Well, the thing about cycling and the thing about this card is it's a little expensive. The -1/-1 counterpart does help because the counter is going to stick around, so you don't necessarily have to cycle 5 cards or 6 cards in the same turn to wrath the board. However, card number 3 on our list kind of helps solve this problem. So since we're talking cycling, Tomer, why don't you tell us about New Perspectives?
All right, well, this, again, I love the cycling mechanic, so I can't stop gushing about it. I really tried not to just fill the top 10 with cycling cards, but I wanted to mention this one because I felt this was a key component of the cycling archetype. New Perspectives has a bonkers secondary clause for the cycling archetype, and it says whenever you have 7 or more cards in hand, you may pay 0 rather than pay the cycling cost. So for the cycling archetype, this is probably the biggest enabler for all shenanigans in the entire deck. You play down New Perspectives, you draw 3 cards, so that's definitely helping you get to 7 cards in your hand. And if your deck is full of cycling cards, you just burn through them until eventually you can't cycle anymore. You just run out of cards. And that enables everything. That enables your Lightning Rift. That enables your Astral Slide. That enables your Archfiend of IFNIR. It enables everything that triggers off cycling that is good and fun in the world. So New Perspectives is fantastic. And even if we're not paying attention too much to the secondary clause, the first, the triggered ability when it enters the battlefield, draw 3 cards, is worth 4 mana already. And this is a 6 mana enchantment. It's actually better than just that by itself as a 4 mana enchantment, because since it is tied to an enchantment, that means you can bounce it, you can blink it, you can repeat that triggered ability over and over again if you have some sort of engine for that. So, for example, Brago King Eternal can always blink it every single time he goes into the combat step. So there's a lot of potential, not just for the cycling part of it, but also the card draw part of it. I wouldn't just run it for the card draw part of it, but it's a really sweet bonus.
So it has potential not just in cycling decks, but various blink archetypes maybe as well? Even if you're playing Brago and you don't care about cycling, is this a consideration?
I would say yes. It's on the high end, but then again, people are playing Muldrifter, and that's 5 mana to hardcast, I think.
Yeah.
So this is a huge step out of that. You draw 2 cards versus you draw 3 cards. I think that's fine, and I also don't think this card's going to be very expensive. So at the very least, it's a good budget inclusion for the Blink deck, as long as you can blink enchantments and not just creatures.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I really like about this card is, from playing cycling a long time ago, Fluctuator is kind of the card that makes the deck work, and it's almost the same as the second half of New Perspectives. It makes cycling cost 2 less, which usually ends up meaning cycling is free in your deck, the same as New Perspectives. The problem is, when you build around that and you don't draw your Fluctuator, your deck runs 100 times worse than it does when you have your Fluctuator. So having 2 fluctuators, it doubles your chances of having access to this effect. It makes it so much easier to build the cycling deck because the effect is so powerful. But before we move on to our top 2 cards, I gotta ask you, you're all hyped for this cycling deck. Do you have an idea of who is your commander for this deck? Like what do you use as your commander if you build a cycling tribal deck? Or doesn't it matter?
Well, okay, so I know what I want to do with it, and I want to go 5 color. The question is, which 5 color commander would I pick for it? And I honestly don't know. I'd just like throw Chromat or something because it looks funny. Yeah. Maybe Child of Alara, because you probably won't have much of a board state, so you don't care that much if the board gets wiped because you're just cycling everything. So maybe Child of Alara would be my top one, but the most important thing for me for the cycling deck is you have access to all the cycling cards to jam all of them into the deck indiscriminately, and that means 5 color.
Oh, so any 5 color commander will do. I would probably go with Tagatog, I guess, if I had to choose. All right, let's go to number 2 on our list, and we have Oracle's Vault, another... I don't even know. This is kind of a mixture of Aetherworks Marvel, Omniscience. I'm assuming you're not playing Brick Tribal. Where does this go in? Where does this go in, Commander Tomer?
I think it's very similar to ASFORETOLD, except it's a little bit more niche. Actually, it's not that similar to ASFORETOLD. I'll take that back. It's specifically for proliferates. Atraxa Praetor's Voice. Here you go. Here's another sweet toy. Because she never had enough toys, right? So as long as you have ways of adding more bricks to Oracle's Vault, it gets really silly really fast. Just activating, you pay 4 mana, you activate it for an additional 2 mana, so that's a 6 mana investment to play the top card of your library. Not that great. Maybe if it's a land, then you got some card advantage out of it. But in general, you're not going to get too much value out of your first application of it. However, if you put just a single counter on and you start doing proliferate shenanigans with Atraxa, with other proliferate cards.
Thrumming Bird.
There's like 5.
Tezzeret's Gambit.
Tezzeret's Gambit. There's like a blue enchantment that does it whenever you cast a spell. There's a bunch. There's a bunch. So once you get to the secondary ability where you have 3 bricks, only 3 bricks, you're starting to cast cards off the top of your library for free. And it's a tap ability. That's all you have to do. So, and there's also no other restrictions. You can't activate this just once per turn or anything. You just tap it. You get free card advantage plus a free spell. You know what's also really good with free spells that just have 1 tap restriction? Paradox Engine. Play Paradox Engine, play Atraxa, lose all your friends, and boom, you're still happy because you have Oracle's Vault, Atraxa, and Paradox Engine. What else do you need? You just play out your deck.
Yeah, that was the first place my mind went. And, it seems so fun. It's so easy. I actually built a deck in Standard around Paradox Engine and Aetherworks Marvel, and Aetherworks Marvel has a huge restriction because now you can't just hit things. You have to hit enough energy to keep spinning your Aetherworks Marvel. With Oracle's Vault, it's so much easier. Once you get the counters, all you have to do is hit any spell and you get to untap and go again. And if you build card draw into your deck, that makes up for some of your fizzles where you might hit a land with your Oracle's Vault. So I think it is very practical that if you have an active Oracle's Vault and a Paradox Engine, with a little bit of deck building, you can really just play your entire deck with that combo, like fairly early in the game.
Yeah, the card is absolutely silly. And if there weren't enough grumblings about Paradox Engine not being banned Commander, Oracle's Vault is going to make that even louder. Like, the same people who hate Paradox Engine are going to hate it so much more when Atraxa starts doing it. And you know what? I would actually just run Oracle's Vault in a mono white deck too, because even though it's really expensive if you're just playing it straight and you're not abusing Paradox Engine, for example, it's still card advantage, and it's still worth it, I would say.
Yeah, that was going to be my last question to you. Do you consider this in color combinations that really need card advantage? And I think you're right. I think the answer is yes. And as weird as it sounds, the fact that you get to play lands off of it is actually pretty helpful as well. If you compare this to like the new Chandra, which has an ability where you plus it and can exile the top card of your library, that doesn't allow you to play lands. So not only does this potentially give you card advantage, it also kind of gives you ramp in a weird way in some situations as well. And drawing cards and ramping are what you want to be doing in Commander. Like, neither one of those is really a bad outcome. So I think that there's potential, even if you're not going crazy and comboing off, especially if you're in a color that just really struggles to generate card advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no shame in just paying. Like, if you only have 2 mana available, you don't have 3 bricks yet, and you're in white, you just play this card, tap it, and hope for a land. So and if you get a land, it's ramp and sweet.
So one last question. It doesn't say you can only do this at sorcery speed. So say you're playing a Commander game, your opponent has the Oracle, they have their 2 mana available. Does that at all dissuade you from attacking your opponent in fear that they're going to do something with the Oracle's Vault to mess up your attack?
Yes, Seth. If you have Oracle's Vault out and you have the mana available, I will actually have to think twice about attacking you.
All right, so it's also a ghostly prison, essentially.
Especially with like library manipulation, like Sensei's Divining Top and Sylvan Library, which are staples in the format. If you run Scroll Rack, and I highly recommend it, especially for white. Yeah, Oracle's Vault is gonna be fun.
Well, speaking of white, the number 1 Commander card on our Amonkhet list happens to be a white card. Actually, it's now a white card. Technically, until Amonkhet, it was a green card. We're talking Anointed Procession, which has literally copy and paste the same text as Parallel Lives. So, is this just Parallel Lives 2.0 gives you more copies of the effect, or is being white a big deal? Does that do something different? Let me know what you think about this one, Tomer.
Well, I think it's superior because obviously it has Gideon on it. So Gideon. We have more Gideon, and that's amazing. So outside of that, outside of the flavor of Anointed Procession, which is awesome, no, it's just Parallel Lives. And I had to mention it as the most hyped card for Amonkhet because tokens as an archetype is one of the most popular archetypes in all of Commander, has been since the very beginning, probably will be until the end of time. And white is one of the best at token makings, white and green. So it makes sense that Parallel Lives is in green, and it makes even more sense, I think, that Anointed Procession is in white. And one of the most powerful color combinations for the tokens deck happens to be green-white. You have Tristani, Selesnya's Voice, if you want to be populating the bigger tokens, if you want to go for like 7/7 tokens and stuff like that. You also have Rise of the Redeemed for like the classic tokens. General comes out early, has elf synergies, and just it makes your board state just explode. So these decks are going to love it. You can even go Bant tokens. You can even go like blue-white tokens. Maybe go like an Embalm deck, because those are all token creatures now that when you embalm them, they come out as tokens. Anointed Procession doubles them. So there's a lot of synergies with tokens, always been heavily supported, and this is going to be by far the most played card out of the entire set, bar none.
So, Tomer, I have to ask you a question to test your magic knowledge here. So, I'm playing a game of Commander. I have a doubling season. I also have an Anointed Procession. I also have a Parallel Lives.
Oh, and no, this is a math question.
And then I cast a Rite of Replication targeting a Mog War Marshal. Which, if you're not familiar with Mog War Marshal, when it enters the battlefield, you make a 1/1 Goblin token. What is the end result? How many 1/1 Goblin tokens do I get in that scenario?
The answer is more than Moto can handle. I'll take that.
I will go with that. I was hoping you would come up with the answer because I just thought of that question. It didn't actually figure it out.
Oh, I'm so bad at math. We'd have to ask Jake for that answer. He'd know it like off the top of my head. Oh yeah, it's easy. You just carry the 2. Man.
I think though these effects do stack, though. I guess that's kind of the point of it, right?
Yeah, it goes exponential. Like, so, you get double and then double that.
Double the double,
that.
then double
times
the double.
Times two, times two,
yeah,
times
okay.
two.
Yeah. So it is beneficial to have more than one of these effects on the battlefield. So you want your Anointed Procession and your Parallel Lives. They're not just redundant and not doing anything extra.
Oh my goodness, yes, all of them. You just if you have Parallel Lives, it's not like, oh, what should I take? What should I take out Parallel Lives or Anointed? No, you just run those. You run Doubling Season. You run Parallel Lives. You run Anointed Procession. You run Rise of Redeemed. You run Tristani. You run everything that doubles everything. You run your Root Bone Defenses and everything that populates and whatnot. And you just have like an army of tokens. It's amazing. It's really, really fun. That's the reason why the archetype is so popular. It's so fun.
Yeah, it does sound like a lot of fun. And hopefully, being in print, this is going to be kind of a budget option of that effect. Doubling Season is insanely expensive now, like $70-$80, and even Parallel Lives has been creeping up where it's not, if you're trying to build a $20 commander deck, it's a lot of your budget. It's creeping up there. So hopefully this is the $1 version of the effect, at least for the next couple years while it's in print.
Yeah, and if you want to invest, you can go get all the foils of this and you'll be sitting on a pretty sound investment. #MTG Finance.
Yeah, you can go buy all these and then just retire to the Bahamas or someplace and call it a life.
You'll be as rich as the Sand Sky in no time.
Well, Tomer, we have a few other cards that didn't quite make our top 10 list. Do you want to? Actually, like 10 or 15, but do you want to give us a really quick, like, one-sentence breakdown of the honorable mentions?
Sure, let's start it off.
So, all right, we got a bunch of honorable mentions, and we're going to go speed mode here to close out our top 10 video with the honorable mentions. So, Tomer, first up, Shadow of the Grave.
It fits in wheel decks, and it fits in cycling decks. Pretty simple. It's a really good card advantage.
Next on our list, one of my favorite cards, of course, since it has the You Win the Game text, Approach of the Second Sun.
I think Seth is going to love it against the odds, Commander Clash format. And it's also, of the janky You Win the Game cards, it's actually really easy to pull off. So just run it. If you have no win conditions in your deck and you're a Pillow Fort deck that does nothing all game, just put Approach the Second Sun. You win.
Just don't try to fork it. I said I wanted to fork it, and that apparently doesn't work. So no forking allowed.
No, if you really want to be really cute with it, use Demonic Consultation. Exile the top 6 cards of your library, and then just draw that after for 1 mana.
That's a good plan. I like that.
Go deep.
Next, we have a card that has kind of been printed a million times before. 3-mana Zombie Lord, Lord of the Accursed.
We never have enough zombie lords. It's a zombie itself. It's a black creature, so all the synergies of zombie tribal. It gives all your zombies +1/+1, which is everything the zombie lords does, and it gives you menace. It's the best zombie tribal card from the set, bar none, and I stand by that.
That's high praise because there's a lot of zombies in this set. Well, next we have Embalm Clone, Vizier of Many Faces.
It's a clone. Clones are really good in Commander. Clone plus stuff is really good in Commander. Vizier of Many Faces is one of the best ones. There's Phyrexian Metamorph, then there's Clever Impersonator, then there's this one. It's 2 clones and 1 card. You can't be upset about that.
Also, you can just mill it into your graveyard. If you're playing graveyard synergies, use it kind of as card advantage in that sense with Embalm
Buried
calls.
Alive.
So, yeah, Buried Alive. Keep that in mind as well. The Embalm part is super sweet.
Anointed Procession. Don't forget about that. Double it.
Next, we have Manglehorn.
This is incredibly powerful artifact hate. It's not as flexible as Reclamation Sage, where it destroys artifacts or enchantments for this exact same mana cost, but if you're really serious about artifact hate, this is the best option as a creature form, and it's probably one of the best cards for competitive Commander as well from the entire set.
Yeah, seems like a good one. The taxing effect of having artifacts entering the battlefield tapped is a nice little bonus with cards like Mana Vault and Mana Crypt and so forth. So
yeah, we have the most broken mana rocks in the history of Magic. Basically.
Staying with the green cards, Vizier of the Menagerie. We have Courser of Krufix, Part 2, Oracle of Moldiah. What is this card?
It's not as good as Oracle of Moldiah. I hate it when people compare it to that because Oracle Moldiah, you always get your value. You're never not enough mana to cast your land off the top of your library like you would with Vizier. It's a Garruk Sword that isn't bad. It's a good Garruk Sword. And it's good. If you have a low converted mana cost for your deck, like Edric, like anything with lots of mana dorks, you're going to play a lot of cards. It's a really solid card advantage.
Next we have, well, our image is Oketra's Monument, but the Monument cycle in general.
I think it's really solid if you're a monocolored deck that is creature heavy, so like basically every janky tribe that we do on Commander Clash, this is going to be really solid ramp for that. And they're triggered, like the extra triggered ability works on any creature, not just the one color that the Monument it's about. And they're really good. I think the white one and the black one are my two favorites. No, sorry, the white one and the red one are my two favorites.
Also, the second ability is free, so you don't have the Drake Haven, gotta pay mana problem, anything like that. Nice little upside. Embalmer's Tools.
Embalmer's Tools. Sidisi Brute Tyrant loves self-mill. Yeah, Gisa and Geralt love self-mill. Throw in Zombie Alchemist. Throw in Altar of the Brood with Undead Alchemist. Throw in Altar of Dementia. You mill at everybody. In Commander, mill. Do it. It's great.
Hazaret's Favor.
Amazing for threatened decks. If you're doing like Brian Stout Arm or the other threatened ones that I can't think of, like Shattergang Brothers, then you steal their stuff, and then you pump them, you swing at their face with their own creature, and then you sacrifice it. It's hilarious, and it's very effective.
Interesting to think of the sack outlet as an upside in some scenarios rather than a downside. Next, we stick in the world of red cards with Combat Celebrant.
It's really, really powerful. Extra combat steps are always really good. Give him haste with, a bunch of red cards that are staples like Fervor and Anger and stuff. And then you give him ways to untap, like the new Exert Lord, Samut, Voice of Dissent, and you've got a really great thing going on.
Also infinite with Kiki Jiki, apparently. So.
Oh, that's yep. Kiki Jiki, broken card.
Slitherblade, the 1-mana 1/2.
One name must be uttered. It's Edric Spymaster Tress. New staple in the deck. Ignore it for everything else except maybe Rogue Tribal, but don't do that.
And that means you won't be playing it because you're still banned from playing Edric.
Plague Belcher. Unless viewers submitted.
Don't submit, Tomer, any Edric decks, please.
Give me all your Edric decks.
Plague Belcher, the new 3-mana 5/4 zombie. Apparently not the best zombie in the set because that's Lord of the Accursed.
I think Lord of the Accursed. Oh, well, it's close. It's close. You got me there, maybe. Goes infinite or is just massive value. You make a lot of tokens like Army of the Damned or something. You play that. All your zombies get wiped because if they don't wipe your board, you kill them with your zombies and you ping them anyway. And then you probably kill them anyway. And then if you want to go infinite because you're mean, you put like a Gravecrawler, you put a Phyrexian Altar or a Rooftop Storm with it. You sacrifice it over and over again. Repeat, rinse and repeat. Everybody dies. Or add Tombstone Stairwell to it. It's great. You kill everybody. It's good.
And we finally made it to the end of our infinite honorable mentions. Heart Piercer Manticore, Fling Manticore, as I like to think of it.
Fling Manticore.
It's like a fling on a Manticore. Yep. A double fling with a triple fling if you have your doubling season. So what about this one, Tomer?
Brian Stoutarm, Yasova Dragonclaw, steal your opponent's stuff. Fling your opponent's stuff at their face after you attack them with Hazaret's Favor, pumping them up. And then when you embalm it, be sure to have Anointed Procession so you double the throwing potential of the Heartpiecer Manticore.
That sounds like a deck. It sounds like a deck. We broke the format.
Brian Stouter, ship it. Just do Anointed Procession, this, and the Hazaret's Favor, and you got a deck. You're good.
Oh, well, Tomer, this is always one of my favorite videos every spoiler season. So any final thoughts on the way out to the door?
Do you see how many cards I was excited about? It's silly. It's silly how many cards I'm excited about. I love this set. The mechanics work really well with Commander. They're not parasitic. They work really well with what Commander wants to do. And Commander wants to have lots of card advantage and lots of graveyard manipulation. They love graveyard manipulation. They love card advantage. I love cycling, so they gave me a cycling archetype. I'm over the moon over that. I'm almost as happy as I was when I got the clue mechanic. And yeah, there's a lot of staples. Anointed Procession, a lot of stuff for the Fling deck, a lot of stuff for the zombie deck as usual. And you even have a Cat Lord. Everybody's happy.
Well, you heard it here. Amonkhet, one of the best sets for Commander in a long time. And it does look super sweet. I agree with you. I don't think we've ever had this many cards on our Commander video list. So many sweet Commander cards to talk about. So anyway, everyone, let us know in the comments if somehow in this massive list of cards we missed the best Commander card or your favorite Commander card.
Oh my goodness, imagine.
Let us know what it is. What cards do you think are best for Commander? What are you most excited to play? What synergies are there? What decks, what commanders are these cards going in? Make sure to let us know in the comments. Tomer, big thanks for hanging out and doing it. It's always fun.
Thanks for having me, as always.
And thanks to everyone for watching. So this is going to wrap it up for our top 10 or 20 or 25 cards from Amonkhet for Commander. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll be back for Hour of Devastation with another one. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.